The gala invitation had a gold border, thick cardstock, expensive, heavy in the hand, my face printed on it, my name in cursive, honoree, Julia Brennan, dementia advocate. I stared at it like it was a stranger wearing my lipstick. They used my name, my story, but forgot one thing. They never asked me to come. If this story felt like a whisper you needed, don't scroll past. I'm still listening. It was a Tuesday. My kitchen smelled like burnt toast and lemon detergent. I stood barefoot in front of the sink, thumb tracing the edge of the envelope like I might bleed truth from it. A scarlet ribbon was printed along the bottom. Symbolic, I guess. But I didn't ask for symbolism. I asked for silence. I tapped the number at the bottom of the invite. It rang 6 times. A woman answered, breathless, chipper, oblivious. "Oh my gosh, Julia, we're honored. You got the invitation early." I let her finish the sentence, didn't interrupt. Then I said, Did you mean to make me an advocate for something you never asked about?" A pause. Paper rustled on her end. "Oh, ... It must have been a mistake. Someone from the board suggested mistake," I repeated. "Or marketing." Another pause. "She said they'd correct it. Said the printer would reissue names on the digital program. Said they'd update the script." I said nothing. Because the damage wasn't just public, it was personal. I hung up. A second later, my phone buzzed. Calendar notification. Gala in 48 hours. All caps. Like a dare. My mother would have hated that. The dramatics. The stage lights. But she would have hated this more. Being used without her permission. Diagnosed at 72. Gone by 77. No stages. No speeches. Just long hospital nights, and a plastic pitcher of water that was always too warm. I walked to my desk. Picked up the invitation again, the one with my face and someone else's story, slipped it into my purse. That purse had been hers. Brown, leather, soft with age, a broken clasp that still clicked with effort. It held tissues and butterscotch candies once. Now it held my decision. I opened my texts, typed, Marco, need draft C sand assist, tomorrow morning. No emojis, number, pleasantries, just fact. The message showed delivered. Then I stood there, in the quiet, staring at nothing. Because sometimes you don't need rage, just resolve. They'd made me their mascot, but I wasn't their memory to exploit. I was my mother's daughter. And that meant something. I whispered, out loud, not for them, but for myself. Let them correct it. The kettle clicked behind me, water boiled. Another ding. Marco, draft ready, reviewing clause for likeness misuse. I smiled, not the warm kind, the knowing kind. They thought they were honoring me, but all they'd really done was awaken me. They used my name to raise money, but forgot to ask if I needed any. At 2:03 a.m., my kitchen hummed with the refrigerator's soft warble, the only sound besides my shallow breath and the muted tap of keys. One tab open, the nonprofit's 990 form. Public record, just not publicized. Line 8. I froze. Brennan Fund, $50,000 designated in memoriam. No one had died, not me, at least. I scrolled back up. My face again. Next to their Gala logo. Same lipstick. Same lie. The cursor blinked like a warning. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I just opened my banking portal and searched for transfers, donations, any trace of that fund. Nothing. Not even a courtesy, $5 acknowledgement. Just silence, the kind that drips, slow and deliberate, into betrayal. I looked at the clock. 2:11 a.m. The Gala site was still live. A red banner flashed across the top like an alarm. Sponsorship deadline. 24 hours left. They were still collecting. Using my story, my photo, my grief, monetized by people who hadn't visited my mother once. My chest thudded, low and quiet, not panic purpose. I opened my email. Marco, I wrote. Add 2 things. Defamation. Unauthorized use of image and name. No emojis, no hope you're well. Just war. And then, silence. The kind that doesn't comfort. The kind that waits. I stared at the screen, heart steady but hands cold. Behind the laptop, on the windowsill, sat her photo, Mom. Taken when she still remembered my name. Hair swept up, lips pursed in that half smile that meant she was tolerating the camera. She hated pictures, said they froze people in the wrong moments. She would have hated this. Flash. I remembered the check, my first one. Written in Sharpie because the pen wouldn't work. I'd handed it over to their founder with trembling fingers and a speech. I'd practiced in the mirror. Use this for research, I'd said. And dignity. They used it for brochures. My knuckles clenched on the keyboard. Send. It whooshed out of my inbox like breath through teeth. I stood up too fast. The chair scraped. The house didn't echo it. Inhaled, because the betrayal wasn't new. It was just finally documented. I reached for my purse. Still her purse. Technically, the same brown leather bag with the broken clasp, now softened by time and my insistence on carrying it like armor. I slipped the gala invite back inside, next to a pen and a peppermint. Then I stood by the sink. No movement, no words, just stillness. At 2:15 a.m., my phone pinged. Marco. Email received. Defamation. Clause being prepped. I exhaled through my nose. Sharp. Certain. Not because I'd won. Not yet. But because someone else finally saw it. To my name wasn't the only thing they'd stolen. They'd hijacked grief. And now, they'd pay for it, one clause at a time. The city was still asleep when I walked into Justice. Marco's office was on the 28th floor. Glass, steel, silence, clean enough to smell like power. The kind of place where apologies don't echo, they get notarized. The security guard didn't ask for my name, just nodded. Maybe I already looked like a woman who'd stopped asking for permission. Marco was waiting, tie loosened, sleeves rolled. His office was lit by dawn spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of light that doesn't warm you, just exposes everything. I laid the papers down on his glass table. The gala invite, the screenshots of the fundraiser, the bank statements that showed what they took and what they never asked for. He didn't touch anything, just looked and he said what I already knew. Privacy violations, defamation, deceptive trade. His voice wasn't angry. It was clinical, like a surgeon deciding where to cut first. I sat down across from him and traced a chip in the edge of the glass table with my thumbnail. A pause. Then I asked it, "Can I attend?" Marco raised an eyebrow. "Disguises aren't your thing." I smiled. "Didn't say disguise," said incognito. He tilted his head. "Red heels work better than a mask." That stopped me. Because it wasn't a joke. It was a plan. The red heels had been hers, my mother's. She wore them once to a wedding, said they were the only part of her body that still looked young. I kept them tucked in the back of my closet like grief in velvet form. He opened his laptop. Clicked, typed, scrolled, drafted. One letter to the charity's legal team, another to the gala coordinators, both lined with steel and the quiet fury of a woman no longer playing nice. He read them out loud. Every line hit like a gavel. I nodded. "No edits." Marco glanced up. "You sure you're ready for this?" I didn't answer with words. Just reached into my purse, hers again, and pulled out the invite. Set it next to the laptop. He understood. Sometimes, you don't need to scream when your silence has paperwork. He hit send. We both watched. The screen, nothing happened. For a full 30 seconds, the world was still. Just the low hum of the AC. The soft click of Marco's mouse resting. Then, ping. Text message. Marco read it. Looked at me. Notice served. I let the words settle between us. Let them drip slow like honey over burned skin. Outside, the skyline glittered like it didn't care who got hurt. But I cared. Because they used my name. They used my mother's memory. They stole our story. And sold it with wine and promises. Now they'd get their reply. Not in tears. Not in silence. But in legally bound consequences. Marco poured coffee. Didn't ask if I wanted any. Just handed it to me like an offering. I held the warm cup in both hands. Let it sit beneath my nose. Smelled like bitterness. And beginnings. In my purse, the red heels waited. Velvet worn down at the edges. They weren't for comfort. They were for memory. And I'd walk into that gala not as their honoree, but as their reckoning. The shoes didn't fit anymore. That was the first betrayal of the night. Not the flashing lights. Not the murmurs when I stepped out of the ride, just the sting of red velvet squeezing decades of memory into a size too small. But I wore them anyway, because some truths are meant to hurt on the way in. The hotel glittered like a lie told too well. Glass chandeliers, black tie smiles, tables named after virtues the board had never lived by. I moved through the lobby like a woman reborn, in blood-red heels. Not honored. Not humbled. Just ... Done pretending. Outside the gala hall, a photographer raised his camera, paused. Recognition flickered. Not delight, not respect, just a glint of guilt when he saw what I was wearing. They thought I wouldn't come. that I'd vanish into silence like so many women before me. Instead, I walked the carpet they laid with stolen praise. The defamation notice sat folded inside my purse, creased but unread. I imagined it humming with the kind of justice that makes hands tremble. At the check-in table, a girl in her 20s scanned the list, smiled blankly. Name? I slid the invite across the table. Her fingers froze. Then she blinked. Twice. Ms. Brennan. I tilted my head. Let's correct your program. Behind me, guests whispered. Forks paused. Midair, the pianist stumbled into a minor chord. I didn't flinch, she stammered, stepping away to whisper with someone holding a clipboard too tightly. I waited, but not for their approval, just for the right moment, and when it came, I walked toward the stage. Each step in those red heels echoed, louder than any speech they prepared, because this wasn't my moment, it was my mother's, and she hated lights. She died in shadows, under fluorescent bulbs that buzzed like guilt, on sheets that smelled like antiseptic and waiting. A memory stabbed through me, holding her hand, her whispering, "Don't let them make you a face on a brochure." So I didn't. I reached the podium. The gala director, a man with slick hair and slippery ethics, started toward me. I raised a hand, not to greet, to warn. He stopped. Good, because this was the speech they never saw coming. I unfolded the paper slowly, but I didn't read it. Instead, I looked out across a room filled with people who donated for the wine, not the cause. And then I spoke. My name is Julia Brennan. You know that, because you've used it. Silence. I was listed as tonight's honoree, not asked, not informed, just ... announced, because nothing sells better than someone else's grief. The pianist stood up. The room tens. And I smiled, the kind you earn after betrayal. This organization raised $50,000 using my name. They called it the Brennan Fund. No disclosure, no permission, not even a thank you. Gasps, forks dropped, wine stilled in glasses. And that money, I continued, it wasn't used for care or research. It was used for this. I gestured around the rented opulence, the rented applause. A woman near the stage began to cry. Not for me, maybe for her own mother. Good, let truth spread like spilled wine. I reached into my purse, the leather worn and soft, still carrying peppermint wrappers and a name that no one would steal again. The defamation notice hit the podium like a verdict. Time for the truth. Lights didn't dim. Applause didn't rise. Just breathless stillness. And one red heel clicking against the wood as I stepped back into the crowd. Because I hadn't come to be honored. I came to haunt them. And from the way the room cracked into silence, I had the mic still echoed when I let it go, not dropped, just ... released. The sound of it resting against wood was louder than their applause ever deserved. And then, a voice behind me. Well, now that we've heard from our surprise guest, it was the board chair. His voice oiled for charm, but cracking at the corners. He motioned for the auctioneer to resume. The man hesitated. Lot number 9, the chair barked. Weekend in Vale. Starting bid, 5,000. Silence. A hand lifted, then dropped halfway. People looked around, unsure what to do with their guilt in a room full of linen and judgment. I stepped forward again. Didn't speak, just raised the remote Marco gave me hours before. The projector screen lit up behind numbers, charts, logos, receipts. 60% of donations rerouted to operational costs. Air quotes. Real theft. Murmurs turned into murmurs, with faces. Angry ones. A man in the front row scoffed. I gave $10,000 last year, he said, and you spent it on catering. The chair laughed nervously. Every nonprofit has administrative expenses. I took the mic again. No one signed. Up to fund your champagne. A woman in a green dress pulled off her name tag, dropped it in her soup. Another stood up. Her chair screeched back against the polished floor. Then, 3 more, 5, 7. A table of donors gathered near the exit, whispering words I didn't need to hear to understand. I turned to the staff clipboard girl. Auctioneer, caterers frozen by the door. Freeze the remaining funds, I said. Calm, cold, or you'll all be in the next article. The girl looked at the chair, then at me, and she nodded. You could feel it in the air like a building, losing power 1 floor at a time. Lights still on, but the current shifting. I held the mic loosely now. The room smelled like betrayal under perfume. I asked the question I came to ask. Who's responsible? A silence dropped over the room so heavy I could hear the hotel. Ice machine click 3 rooms away. The pianist closed his lid. The board chair's lip trembled. He opened his mouth, then closed it, hands shaking. Finally, I'll confess, he said. It was barely a whisper. I didn't flinch. Not when he stepped back. Not when the audience leaned in like witnesses at a sentencing. I just placed the purse on the podium. Her purse, unsnapped it with a click that echoed louder than their auctioneer ever did. Inside, her photo, the folded letter, the Gala program, with my name scribbled out in pen. I placed each down like evidence, like relics. I looked out across the wreckage of wine glasses and forced alliances, and I said the last line, like a prayer with teeth. Let's rebuild something real. His breath reeked of whiskey and regret. We were in the boardroom now, or what passed for one, a side suite dressed in mahogany and lies. He closed the door behind us like a man sealing his own fate. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he said. Funny, that's exactly what guilty men say right before the fall. I didn't speak. Not yet. He rubbed his temples, unbuttoned his blazer with trembling fingers. I was trying to keep it afloat, he murmured. After the grants dried up, we needed to look strong. And my mother's story made you strong? I asked. His head sank lower. It sold hope. Hope doesn't come with the catering. Bill, I didn't say it. He heard it anyway. The air was heavy with rotting goodwill. He reached into a drawer and slid a folder across the table, slow, like it might bite him on the way out. Here, it's all there. I opened it. Receipts, bank transfers, a private account labeled consultancy retainer. His name on every deposit. You stole from the people who trusted you, I said. He didn't deny it. Instead, he looked at me like a drowning man. Please, don't ruin us. There it was. Not an apology, a plea for silence. I pulled out my phone, pressed record. He didn't stop me. I wanted him to, just to see if he'd finally try. Instead, he slumped forward, elbows on knees. Voice, low like confession, tasted worse than crime. I took $82,000 for bonuses, travel, retention packages. We doctored the reports, kept the board in the dark. The Gala was just the cover. I said nothing, just watched him say what needed saying. There was a stillness in me, not peace, not fury, a numbness so deep it felt clean. When he finished, I clicked stop, saved the file, sent it to Marco. Then I stood. He looked up like a man, about to be sentenced. Board oversight, new audit team, external legal review. And you resign publicly. His mouth opened. And if you don't, I added, slipping the phone back into my purse. That recording goes to every newsroom in the city. I zipped the bag slowly. His eyes filled, not with guilt, but survival instinct. Deal, he whispered. Outside the room, the Gala was disintegrating. Guests spilling into corridors, voices sharp and scattered. The pianist was gone. The wine had stopped flowing. I walked through them like a ghost, made of red heels and consequences. The elevator doors opened. I didn't look back. Outside, the night smelled like chlorinated fountains and scandal. I stood beneath the portico, purse still tucked tight under my arm. That bag had carried tissues, hard candy, legal papers, and now a confession that might undo them all. I dialed Marco. He answered on the second ring. We have our leverage, I said. He didn't ask for details, just said, good. I hung up. The wind caught the edge of the Gala program, still sticking out of my purse. I didn't tuck it back in. I let it flutter, half exposed, half forgotten, because some truths don't need to scream. They just need to wait. And then, my phone buzzed. A news alert. Charity scandal deepens. Source reveals internal fraud. I smiled, not wide, not cruel. Just ready. Because this wasn't over, it was beginning. The kettle screamed before I did. That's the only reason I didn't. I poured the water, steadied my breath. The cup shook anyway. Jasmine. The kind my mother used to brew when her hand still remembered how. The letter sat open on the counter. Clean, official, surgical, but not sharp enough, not yet. I picked up the pen like it weighed more than memory, and added 3 words beneath the damages clause. Punitive, emotional, They'd stolen more than money. They'd stolen silence and tried to sell it back to me as honor. I tapped open my messages, texted Marco, add defamation tally, include all articles, estimate brand impact. He responded with a single dot. That meant understood. The T burned my lip. I didn't flinch. Some wounds cauterize on contact. The window above my sink framed the street like a photograph, still, wet, and pretending nothing had happened. Like the night hadn't cracked open just hours ago. Like my name hadn't been dragged across screens in fonts too. Clean for the mess they described. Click. I opened the drawer by instinct. The stamp sat exactly where she left it last, wooden, worn, letters fading. Final demand. I pressed it down hard against the envelope, felt the resistance. The ink bled a little. Good. Then I folded the letter into thirds, with the precision of someone folding a burial flag. I addressed the envelope. Arranged same-day courier, because justice, like grief, needs delivery, not delay, and then reached for her chair, the one we never moved after she passed, still tucked in the corner like it was waiting for her weight. I sat in it for the first time since. Everything in me went still. I didn't cry, didn't rage. Just. Let the silence spool out like thread between then and now. Don't become them, she'd once whispered, when her voice was more breath than tone. No matter how loud they get. That memory hit harder than the news alert. Harder than his confession. I took the letter from the table, held it in the same hand I used to hold hers with. Then the ping. An email. Subject, meeting request, legal team, Gracefield Foundation. We believe a discussion would be mutually beneficial. Please advise availability. Mutual. That word always meant, we're afraid now. I hit reply. Tomorrow, noon. In writing. Another tea bag, another cup. I didn't pour it for comfort. I poured it for fuel. Because if they thought the storm had passed. They hadn't seen what happens when a daughter rewrites the script her mother refused to finish. The envelope waited by the door, my purse beside it, lighter now, but still carrying the weight of her name. The clock in the hallway chimed 12. I didn't flinch. I just whispered, here come the terms. Starch in the collars, sweat under pearls. And silence the kind that isn't respectful. Just delayed panic. They were already seated when I walked in, sunlight slicing through glass like truth, ready to cut. Marco followed me. Calm, measured. He didn't need to say anything. His presence was punctuation. The boardroom looked like what it pretended to be, sleek, transparent, important, but the walls couldn't hide what had rotted inside them. They didn't offer me a seat, so I took the one at the head and placed her purse on the table. Had already played out. Now came evidence. Click. The screen came alive behind me. Slide 1. The original Gala flyer, with my name erased. Slide 2. Account transfers marked consultancy. Slide 3. A waveform. The audio started to play, his voice, shaky. I took 80. The Gala ... was just the cover. I paused the recording mid-confession, not out of mercy. Just to let them marinate. One board member reached for water, missed the glass. Another whispered to someone who wasn't listening. Your treasurer, I asked, voice steady, resigned. I'll step down immediately. That was the beginning of the tilt. A woman in a coral blazer stood. We didn't know, you didn't ask, I said. Then a shuffle of folders, a nervous glance at Marco. The chair cleared his throat. Please, Julia, give us a chance to make amends. Here comes the plea. I leaned forward. You don't get to make amends. Pause. You get to follow terms. A beat, then oversee every cent. New audits, transparent books. Every donor email routed through me. You'll put out a statement, not just apology. Acknowledgement, and I'm taking over interim operations, effective today. His mouth moved, but the words stayed trapped behind pride and panic. And then the door opened. Not security, not staff. Volunteers. From the soup kitchens, the phone banks, the actual work. They entered without a word, forming a silent line along the wall. One of them, Amanda, who once handed out blankets with my mother in the snow, spoke first. We back her. The chair's voice cracked. This is a coup. No, I said, standing. This is a correction. Marco placed a single paper in front of him, a board vote petition. Signatures already filled. You can step aside, I said, or be removed. Silence. Then the gavel. Not from him, from the oldest board member, a man who hadn't spoken the entire time. He tapped the table once. Effective immediately, he said. Julia Brennan, interim executive director. No applause, just air sharper now. I gathered the purse, still zipped, still full of memory and grit, and I walked out the room I used to feel small in. Now it fit me, like armor. The glass doors shut behind me. I didn't turn around. Outside, the wind lifted the edge of the new agenda folder I held in my hand. A clean one. No scribbles, no redactions. Just a title, Gracefield Rebuilt. And I whispered, "This ship sails my course now." It was the same building, same address, but the air tasted different. No perfume trails, no buzzwords in glass jars, just brewed coffee, honest tension, and a name that hadn't been bought. That was the point. This time, nothing would be sold. The sign was modest, matte, unlit, unbranded, but bold. Dignity and aging. I walked in, holding her purse like scripture, still zipped, still sacred, because some things you carry, others you build on. The donors sat in folding chairs, no caviar, no flute quartet, just paper cups. And open books, real ones, stood at the podium. No microphone, no spotlight, just the live stream and the truth. "Good morning. Let's talk about where every dollar went and where it will." Act 1. Behind me slides clear, unedited salaries, overhead, recovery plan. The confession played again, but this time they weren't shocked. They nodded, some even clapped. A woman raised her hand. "Why didn't anyone stop them sooner?" I didn't flinch. "They counted on your silence. I counted on your memory." That landed. Then I clicked to the next slide. Here's who's staying. Photos of volunteers, social workers, survivors. No executives. No initials behind names. Just faces. Act 2. The next screen was blank, except for one word: stories. "We won't post staged smiles anymore," I said. Just words, real ones. And then I told hers. My mother's. About the time the doctor misspelled her name, and when she whispered, "If they forget my name, they'll forget I lived." That memory hit like it always did, low and deep. But this time, I let the silence fall around it. No rush to fill it. No need to rescue the room. Just stillness. Then came a shift. Marco passed me a list. Donors, pledging seed gifts, no conditions. Amanda, from the blankets in the boardroom, stepped forward. "We raise 5,000. Grassroots, no grants." One by one, they stood, not for applause, for duty. Then I reached into her purse, pulled out an old, wrinkled post-it, the one she'd tucked into every lunchbox, even at 60. "Do it with love, or don't." And I placed it on the table beside the new charter. Act 3. I smiled. Not for them, for her, and for me. "Let's do this right." They clapped, not thunderous, just enough to mean it. Then my phone buzzed. Subject, exclusive request, national morning show. I looked at the screen. At my reflection in the glass behind it, and I whispered, "Let's see if they're ready for the real story." I expected applause. Instead, I got tears. A woman raised her hand, slowly, like lifting shame off her shoulders. She didn't speak at first, just opened a yellowed envelope and placed it on the table. Inside, a receipt, donation, 10 years ago, $500 she couldn't afford. "They said it went to mobile units," she whispered, "but I never saw a single one." The room didn't blink. It breathed in the weight of betrayal, then held it like oxygen suddenly felt earned. I nodded, once, then passed her a notepad and a pen. "Let's start from the beginning." The focus group was small, chairs scraped on tile, windows cracked for breeze, coffee in mismatched mugs, but the stories, unfiltered. UNFORGOTTEN. A retired nurse sobbed over a relative's denied grant. Another man held up a printout of an old Gala. Photos circled his aunt's name with a shaking finger. She baked for them, for years. They forgot her name at the memorial. Every time the stories swelled, I said the same thing: add it to the log. Marco stood in the corner, typing each detail into our real-time ledger. Not a spreadsheet, not a PR line, a shared, open document, live, transparent, unapologetically traceable. Above it, a banner hung crooked: "Dignity in aging. Every name matters." I hadn't approved the tagline. Amanda printed it last minute, but when I saw it, I didn't fix it. Because crooked still means standing. The ledger grew with every story. We logged in kind donations, trackable QR codes, every dollar with a fingerprint, and ATMesta and beta, and then a pause. Not silence, exactly, but that rare, sacred stillness when no one needs to prove anything anymore. I went into the back office, pulled down the storage bin with my mother's handwriting scrawled on masking tape, "Event Archives." I peeled it open and reached for the green spiral notebook she used when Excel confused her. Every name, every volunteer shift, Every lemon, bar count, in pen, I traced one name. Mrs. Lennox, my mother's best friend, died before she could reclaim her dues. I walked back in, held it up. We used to track every good thing, I said, by hand, in faith, and I placed it next to the iPad running the digital ledger. Past, present ink, and code. Truth in both languages. One of the donors leaned over the iPad. This, is real, I smiled. Trust doesn't need flash, just receipts. I was closing the screen when Marco's phone lit up. He glanced at it, his eyebrow twitched. He handed it to me. Text. One line. Defamation countersuit pending. Prepare for court. I didn't flinch. I reached for my mother's old notebook. Again, flipped to the back. There it was. Her scribbled phrase in blue ink and underlined twice. Nothing truthful fears court. The room quieted. The breeze lifted the corner of the ledger page on the iPad. I let it flap, like a flag. Like we'd just claimed the ground we stood on, and I whispered, more to myself than to them, then let's give them something worth fearing. They accused me of defamation, after robbing the dead and the dying, and somehow, I was the problem now. Funny how truth sounds dangerous when power feels cornered. Marco placed the binder in front of me, thick, heavy, cold as the silence before. A verdict. I opened it. The first page held a photo, me, at my mother's bedside, taken without permission, used in their pamphlets. I didn't cry, I didn't blink, I flipped the page. The prep room smelled like stress and HIGHLIGHTRS. We turned witness statements into chapters, spreadsheets into stories. Marco annotated timelines, I annotated motives. My fingers stopped on a name, their old chair, the man who once asked me if dementia was just forgetting dinner. He'd filed the countersuit. But the receipts, literal and emotional, weren't on his side. We don't have to go public, Marco said. We could settle. I looked at the wall, pinned to it, my mother's green spiral notebook, open to a page listing volunteer birthdays, including one circled in red. Mrs. Lennox always remembers yours, even if she forgets her own. I said quietly, public is where they broke us. Public is where we'll rebuild. The flashback came without warning. I was 19. Interning at a legal aid clinic. I'd printed a full brief, double-sided, thinking I was clever. My supervisor shredded it in front of me. Truth, she said, doesn't hide in margins. Now here I was, printing court copies of our filing, single-sided margins wide, letting truth breathe. The day we filed, I wore gray. Not power red, not funeral black, just gray, because this wasn't theater. This was air clearing, table flipping, mirror holding. And when I signed the final page, full countersuit, truth heavy, and confession lined, I didn't shake, not even once. Back home, I read through my testimony aloud. Every word sounded like sandpaper. Rough, true, unapologetic. At the part about my mother's erased donations, I paused. My voice broke, not from sadness, but clarity. I whispered, they banked on her forgetting, but she remembered, so I will too. Then I turned the page and finished the rest without looking down. That night, I stood in the kitchen, boiling water, holding the mug she used to call her courtroom coffee. It was chipped now, but it held heat just the same. Outside, cicadas screamed like truth finally had a voice. Marco texted, court date confirmed, September 10th, you ready? I stared at the screen, not with fear, with memory. My mother, whispering to herself as she signed petitions. The chair she refused to sit in if it wasn't earned. The purse she always zipped like dignity held in leather. I walked to my desk, opened that same purse, took out her folded donation card, the one with her initials, unchanged. I placed it on top of the binder. No glass case, no courtroom exhibit, just a reminder. This wasn't about ego, it was about erasure. And I whispered, see you there. The first gala I ever attended had champagne towers and silver lies. This one had folding chairs, and a scroll of names on the wall. Not sponsors, survivors. No red carpet, just stories, and no one brought cameras. Because we finally knew, truth doesn't need a lens, it needs a voice. The ballroom wasn't even a ballroom, just the high school gym, cleared out by volunteers. Someone draped string lights across the rafters. They swayed like they weren't sure they belonged, but we did. My heels, silver, worn, scuffed just enough to prove I walked here. clicked softly against the polished wood. I hadn't worn them since her memorial, not because of grief, because of grit. They weren't for standing still, they were for standing ground. A hush settled as the lights dimmed. We didn't dim them for drama. We did it so the audio could speak louder than ego. One by one, the voices played. Old recordings, new confessions, soft cracks in speech when someone remembered their mother's laugh, or the time their father forgot his way home but remembered their middle name. We didn't clap after each. We sat in the silence, held it like thread between generations. Behind me, the screen kept updating, line by line, live ledger, not totals, stories. $15 in memory of Aunt Delia, who knitted blankets until her fingers gave out. $200, because they told my granddad he wasn't the demographic. The ticker rolled, not like stock prices, like truth being tallied, in public, on purpose. Amanda leaned in. They called. From the Times. Want a quote for tomorrow's cover? Didn't answer, just walked to the table in the back corner. On it, framed under cracked glass, a note. The last one my mother wrote me. In green ink, folded and creased from living too long in a purse that had no softness left. Don't wait for permission to do what's right. I turned back to the mic. I spoke quietly. So they had to lean in. This fund isn't mine. Pause, a swallow, the click of someone setting down a cup too gently. It's yours. And something shifted, not in applause. That came later. Not in lights, they stayed dim, but in the posture of the room, like people stopped sitting and started rooting. Amanda whispered again, this time with a grin. They're calling it Charity Reborn. I looked at the old donation card I kept in my blazer pocket, her initials still faded but whole, pressed it to my chest, just once, and said into the mic, we stand together. The applause started slow, but it swelled like something finally breathing again, after years of being buried beneath silence. And in the corner, unnoticed, a door creaked open, just a sliver, but wide enough to let the night air in. They called it a community center, but the plaque outside still read storage units. See no ribbon, no tours, just warmth waiting behind a dented metal door. I stepped inside, and everything smelled like history, trying to breathe again. Coffee, curry, cheap tile, cleaner, hope. They'd turned the old loading dock into a library. No lock, just a shoebox where you could leave notes if you borrowed a book too long. An elder woman, Ronnie, pressed my hand between both of hers. She didn't say thank you. She said, you came. And somehow that landed deeper. No press followed. No one live streamed it. Only one mic, hanging from the ceiling like a tired bird. We gathered in the back lot. Sun-high soil stubborn, but hands ready. A teenage volunteer broke the first patch of dirt with a rusted trowel. His grandmother watched, eyes shining like maybe her bloodline finally meant something again. I crouched beside them, fingers deep in earth, and memory hit me like sunlight through water. My mother, years ago, planting daisies outside our apartment, said, you plant shallow, you hope deep. I'd rolled my eyes, but now, kneeling in this shared garden of ache and repair, I understood. Someone handed me a plaque, unveiled it gently, like it might bruise, in honor of Eleanor Brennan, who never forgot a birthday. There it was, not on a stage, just in the soil, where names belong, if they're meant to grow. The elders clapped, but softly, like they were afraid applause might scare the flowers. Tears fell, not the dramatic kind, the relieved kind, the kind that tastes like something being released after too many seasons underground. I stood quietly, didn't speak right away, let the wind carry the silence, watched a petal fall, land, on an empty garden glove, the glove I'd placed beside the plaque, hers, still stained from lemon bar mix and volunteer days. I bent down, pressed my palm over it, whispered, we did it for you, Mom. And then, a ripple, Ronnie's grandson, pointed to the far corner. A single daisy had bloomed early. Wrong season, wrong time, but there it was, yellow, crooked, alive. They used to say the heels were the power, the flashbulbs, the staircase, the illusion of height, but power isn't height. It's memory that refuses to be edited. I stood where they once made me feel small, and this time, the heels weren't on my feet. They were behind glass, encased in a cube, under soft white light, my old red stilettos, the ones I wore to the first gala, before I knew what silence costs, before I learned the price of being polite. They were scuffed now, one heel chipped but still upright, So was I. The staircase hadn't changed. Still marble, still dramatic. But the banners on the wall, different side dash by dash side, old gala photos, champagne smiles, and vanished donations. And new ones, plastic chairs, garden dirt, laughter with no filters. Below me, the room shimmered, not with sequins, but with presence. Ronnie wore a sari stitched with forget-me-nots. Marco had his sleeves rolled up, clipboard abandoned. Amanda danced barefoot with a woman who used to organize coat drives. There were no VIP tables, just round ones. Everyone level. I reached into my blazer pocket. The locket, my mother's oval, faded gold. I used to think it was just costume jewelry. But inside, a tiny piece of paper, her handwriting, still alive. I walked to the glass case, opened it, placed the locket between the heels, let it rest. Then I turned to the mic, and for the first time in a long time, I laughed, not because anything was funny, but because something was finally light. I used to think you had to arrive in red heels to be heard, I said, but turns out, every step counts, even the ones taken in kitchen slippers. The crowd smiled, some cried, someone whispered, "Amen," and then the lights dimmed, not for drama, but for projection. Behind me, a live feed of the garden scrolled across the back wall. One flower for every name, every dollar, every rewritten truth. Stood still, felt the hush again. Not as silence, as agreement. In that quiet, I looked at the heels, and I remembered the first time I wore them, shaking, sinking slightly into the carpet, feeling like the gala had teeth and I was the meal now. There, behind glass. I'm in flats, but I've never stood taller. And as the projection faded, replaced by stars through the skylight, I whispered one word to the locket: onward.